here today with Brendan. How are you, Brendan?
Yeah, good yourself?
Good, thank you. You had a big week this week?
Yeah, as usual. Yeah.
As usual?
Yeah.
I had a big Friday night. I was at the gym, as you would probably know, and as you're aware that we're just a couple of gym freaks. So if you're expecting us to say the bar, you would have been wrong.
But I was under the barbell on squats.
Yeah, and I was on a mat rolling with other men, and we don't need to get into that, but I was doing some jiu-jitsu, and now I'm very sore. Yeah. So whatever story you might make up in your mind, you know what, keep it there.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today, Graham?
Today we're talking about sticking to your word.
That's another big topic. We're really laying out these big topics, eh?
Yeah.
Man, alright. So, sticking to your word. Let's hear your input about why sticking to your word matters and how that can affect the way you work, your relationships with people. Let's hear it all.
Yeah, okay, so sticking to your words, not just, to me, it's not just other people sticking to their word to you. Say if they've said they're going to do something and they follow through with it, or if they don't do it, it's to yourself as well. So for example, if in the past, if I wanted to do a diet, for example, and I said that I'm going to start on Monday, and Monday goes by, and I said, I don't want to do it today, I might do it tomorrow, or I might do it next week. That's not sticking to my word. And that just takes away, in the past it's taken away from my own sort of self-confidence in myself, and that affects obviously your life as well, your day-to-day tasks and your belief in yourself that you can follow through on things. So that's in that respect, instead of doing it to yourself, and it applies not just to your diet, it's everything gives you to do. And I find personally what I've found is the highest standard you set for yourself, the least likely, the more likely you're going to stick to your word.
Yeah.
And the more higher the more it means to you as well. So, and sometimes with a higher standard comes a higher expectation as well. So,
and a big responsibility.
Yeah, and big responsibility. So I've found even sort of more lately that you sort of put a high expectation on yourself, and then it's obviously harder to meet to that standard. So sticking to your word can be a bit harder, but at the same time, it's a lot more rewarding as well. When you know in yourself that it was fucking hard to do this thing, and you followed through with it anyway, despite all the obstacles that are in your way, it just gives you a whole lot more confidence to tackle everything.
What I wonder though is that if you're somebody who values themselves and puts your word at a high level and has a high standard, then why would be following your own word be so hard? Because the only reason following your word would be difficult would be because you don't put yourself, or you don't rate yourself at a level that you feel like that you should be. So I'll give you an example. So if I was to compare myself to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I go, hey, I could be as big as Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I feel as though that what I do and what I practice would be that of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because I make that comparison and I incline all of my focus towards doing what he would do, why would then be going to the gym a hard thing? Why would following a diet be a hard thing? Like if I say that I'm like Arnold Schwarzenegger and I do what Arnold Schwarzenegger would do, then, and I emulate myself like that, then why would those things be difficult? Why would I go, hey, I'm going to go to the gym on Monday and then not go? And so often who you compare yourself to is often how you will respond to different things in different circumstances. And so if you're finding difficulty in following your word, it's likely because you haven't measured yourself either to yourself to a high standard where you've gone, hey, I value myself and my well-being enough where everything that I say turns to gold. Everything that I do turns to gold. But because that value, that inherent value isn't there for whatever reason, maybe someone told you that you weren't good enough, or someone said, hey, you'll amount to nothing, or someone did something where they betrayed your trust and your confidence in yourself. So now the story that you ascribe is that, hey, my word's no longer valuable. And so each time that I attempt to make changes in my life because of that continuous story of my word's not good enough for whatever reason, of course it's going to be difficult. But if you have a high value for yourself and for what you do, why would sticking to your word be so difficult? Like, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just more so talking in respect of it's just more things to do, like to get to a higher standard.
Yeah.
More than just a base level of things.
Of course.
It's just an ever evolving expectation of greater things, higher things, rather than the basics.
Well, the basics too you need, because if you expect to get yourself at a higher level, you can't go from step 1 to step 100 straight away.
Yeah.
And there are going to be basic principles that you'll need to follow in order to then propel yourself to a high standard. It's not a wonder why people get upset when they don't get rich quick after someone told them that they can get multi-million dollars in 90 days. And it's why someone gets upset when they go, you told me that I could be shredded in 6 weeks if I did your challenge and I'm not shredded. It's because they value somebody else's glittering promise without any base premises or base principles that they follow on their own, and they have to use somebody else's word in order to feel justified. And so being able to actually have a set base principle will then allow for you to get to a higher standard. But having these base principles, it makes your word easier to follow.
Yeah.
Because if you give yourself a mountain to climb and you're only just a regular hiker and you're not Sir Edmund Hillary who can climb mountains, then of course you're going to have a difficult time keeping to your word, because you're giving yourself way too high of demand without the actual skill to meet that demand. And so being able to recognize where you actually are will allow for you to easily keep your word, which is why when you want to embody excellence and you want to have a high standard, there needs to be the basics. But if you aren't covering the basics either, well then you might as well not go out and achieve, because you'll keep going out, you'll keep achieving, or you'll keep crashing out, which is what most people end up doing, because they set themselves this exorbitant goal, but then they don't have anything basic to follow, so then they'll keep looking at the dream, they'll keep looking at the goal, but then never follow through on anything. And so having the basics there allows for that person to give themselves a solid foundation. And that's why I was saying earlier that having a really high value for yourself then allows for you to go, hey, you know what, whatever I say goes, whatever I say matters. So that then if I go, hey, look, I'm not at the level that I need to be at yet, here's what I need to do, you'd be more willing to go and do it. Where if you're not somebody that values themselves, then you can say all those things, but the likelihood of you actually doing it will be a lot less likely, because you haven't put yourself through the process of genuinely having a look at yourself and going, hey, like, I deserve better. Or, hey, you know, I am actually an interesting creature who does matter and who has an impact on people's lives, even if it's small. Like, you are significant. But because for whatever reason we debate our own significance, then our word then diminishes, or the gravitas of our word diminishes. So it doesn't have that emphasis, it doesn't have that power. It's like when people command respect. Like, you can see the people that when they walk into a room and they start talking, everyone listens. It's because they have that gravitas, it's because they have that confidence, but it's also because they've done the basic work necessary to get themselves to that high standard, and then went that extra bit further as well. Where another person who walks into the room and no one bats an eye, you can clearly see that that person is clearly upset that they don't have the same respect as the other person does, and it's because they haven't done the work, the basic work, and then going the extra mile either. And so the person who has done the work and who has the respect that he commands, you'll be more trusting that he keeps his word than the other person. But you need those basic things. Then you go out and go that extra mile. And that's what you were saying, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I find it's sometimes better to, in terms of keeping your word, to say something like, I don't know, say you're going to do such and such task. It's better sometimes to under-promise and over-deliver, because you get that in your, not only in your own mind, but the other person, if you're promising the world and you turn up and give them fuck all and not enough, then they're going to be disappointed in that. And
that'll be enraged.
Yeah, and so are you, because you know in your heart that you've promised such person that you're going to do something for them and you haven't delivered. I'd rather do that any day of the week than fucking just, because so many times before I've heard people say they're going to do this for me, or anyone I've heard conversations elsewhere say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they turn out doing nothing for it. And that, to me, it's just not being true to yourself or to the other person. It's not, it's not genuine, it's not being a true being your true self.
It's blatant dishonesty.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there are people out there like that.
Yeah.
And so we all have that to a capacity. Like, we aren't these perfect beings. I think because if we were, then I think society would be a whole lot better off. But because we aren't, because we are flawed in that way, it's always meaningful that there are people out there who seek that and go and attain that, which is the whole purpose of this podcast, right? So that we can describe different ways for you to go and seek that extra thing that will help you develop in the way that you feel that you need to. And that's just honest vulnerability, where you go, hey, I'm not exactly where I want to be. Hey, I've done some silly stuff in the past and it has chipped away at my confidence, but now I know better. And now, because I know better, I want to see other people do better. And so by keeping my word and being productive in any way that I can so that other people benefit, then that's the most honest that somebody could be. Being able to inspire someone to do something better for themselves is one of the most powerful things that a human can feel. And so for yourself, like you said earlier, there were moments in your past where you had made decisions that didn't ultimately benefit you and chipped away at your confidence. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Do you have any stories where you said that you were going to do something, it didn't happen, and then the resulting consequences? Is there a story that you can tell our audience?
Well, it was more with the diet thing. I kept telling myself, I did it first when I was going to do 75 hard at the start. I kept just putting it off and say, I'll do it this week. No, fuck it, I'll do it next week. It doesn't line up, and so forth. And then eventually, I ended up doing it, and it's benefited me greatly. So that's one example. The other thing is just more or less deciding to do stuff as well. If I'm going to say, for example, I might want to make a decision to, when I was doing the powerlifting comp, initially, I was weighing up between doing bodybuilding style and powerlifting style. I said to myself that I wanted to make a decision in a week, but it didn't end up turning to be a week. It ended up being 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and that just, to yourself, you lose a bit of trust in yourself, because you said that you're going to make that decision, and you didn't make the decision, and ultimately that hindered the process as well. Like it delayed the process more than anything. So yeah, that's one example. Work related sometimes as well. You say you want to. Sometimes you can control so much, but sometimes you intend to do something at work. Say, if I wanted to get such a thing done today, right? If I wanted to get the specials flyers done today, just finish them off, and rather than doing that, I didn't get it done. I did something else instead. That's not sort of keeping my word to myself as well. I know sometimes it's out of control, but still you'd get a better feeling out of it by actually completing it, despite all the obstacles. Sometimes you're prioritising things, do things what I perceive to be a bit more important at the time. But a lot of the time you have to work on that long-term project as well at first, and then go to your priority areas, because or else that long-term project may not ever happen.
Yeah, well, at the same time, like, priorities are called priorities because, like, they need to be done, like, immediately. And so to do a long-term project over a priority, I don't think that priority that you're leaving behind isn't a priority anymore. And so, but with that being said, like, it's one of those things that are really important in life, that I feel, being able to make a decision there and then. Because often when people make decisions slow, then opportunities go, they get more tentative, they procrastinate way more, and it just doesn't happen for them. Where a person who's able to make a decision quickly and then figure out that they've made the wrong decision will allow them to then recalibrate the decision that they need to make, which will then end up leading to their success. Because the person who's able to fail forward will go, hey, well, I won't be doing this again, or hey, you know what, yeah, I will do this again because I'm stubborn and I think it'll work, but then they keep doing it, it doesn't work, and then they figure out that they need to make the decision differently. Where the person that doesn't make the decision at all and is too slow to make those decisions, of course they're going to lose out. And then when they don't make the decision at all, despite telling themselves that they will make the decision, of course their trust is going to erode, of themselves. And so being able to go, hey, you know what, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the things that I think that are going to happen, I'm making this decision today. And you make the decision. And sometimes the decision is no. Like, it doesn't always have to be yes as well, because you can decide to not do something. If you go, hey, you know what, I'm going to eat better, but then you eat like shit, then of course you've just corrupted your trust. But you can also go on the other end, hey, you know what, I'm not going to eat like shit. Then you don't eat like shit because in your mind you told yourself that you're not going to eat like shit. So you move past all the distractions, you remove all the temptation, and you don't eat like fucking shit. Oh my God, you just fucking follow through on your word. So following through your word doesn't just have to be, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do it. It also can be, hey, I'm not going to do this, and you don't fucking do it, right? So there's two ways that it can be done. Not just, oh, I said I was going to do this today, but I've got this on and I've got that on, and she said this and he said that, and I couldn't get it done. And then suddenly you tell your coach why you haven't lost any weight for the week or the fortnight, whenever you check in, and all these excuses that you made up to justify why something didn't happen, despite you paying for this coaching that you said that you wanted to get because you wanted to be better, but you ended up doing exactly what you were doing anyway. And so what the fuck are you paying the coach for? And so all of this, and I say this because I say this from experience, like, I've done this. I've been that idiot that went, hey, I need a coach because I feel as though that a coach can help me, but then I don't get help because I don't ask for it, and then I try and do everything myself. And so I've done that for years. And so I don't say it with malice, what I've just said to you, and I don't say it with disrespect, but if you are going to make a decision, you need to make it in a way that is going to translate to your success in whatever way that looks like, regardless of consequences, regardless of things that people are going to say, because people are going to say things all the time.
Yeah.
What matters the most is how you feel when you look in that mirror or you look on that camera lens and you see yourself talking or you see your own reflection and you don't fucking cringe.
Yeah.
And the reason you do cringe is because you look at yourself and you don't give yourself enough credit and you don't give yourself enough value where you can go, hey, I'm worthy of making significant decisions. And so by giving yourself that grace, by saying, hey, I'm a human being, I'm flawed, and I've got a lot to work on, it becomes much easier to make decisions because you're no longer trying to hide who you are. You're not trying to masquerade this idea or this ideal version of yourself anymore. You're going, this is who I am right now. Here's who I intend to be. Here's what I'm doing. I need some support. I need some accountability. Can you help me? And then a person might say yes. And if that person says yes, well then it's their responsibility to follow through on their word about that, which is what coaching is about. And so understanding that it isn't going to be perfect and it isn't going to end up exactly the way you think it should, that should be much easier for you to go, well, you know what, I need to make a decision here and now. But to people, and us included as well, decisions can be hard because we weigh up too much, we think too much. We're in our minds way too much and not enough in our bodies and our hearts. We don't have trust, we don't have faith. And so without those things, then of course your brain's going to compromise. Of course you're going to hear that bitch voice instead of that boss voice. And when you are in alignment with yourself, like your body, your mind, your soul, and your word, like your word is your bond, then of course then following your word is going to be very simple and a lot easier than someone who doesn't trust themselves. And so being able to make a decision quickly far outweighs the detriments of making a decision slowly, because it's way more detrimental to make a decision slowly than it is quickly. That's why we jumped on this podcast. How long were we nulling over making this podcast? Like a year? We're in my unit. Like we're just talking about how we're gonna call the podcast, what we're gonna do, and everything else. And then week after week went, and we just put it off. And suddenly we just said, no, you know what? Fuck it, we're making this thing, right? And we'll book this room out and just get it done. And so sometimes the decision just needs to be made, and the more decisions you make, and the more you follow through on your decisions, the more you're going to trust your word. That's as basic as it gets.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was trying to say with that in terms of making the decision. If I in my situation, if I made that straight, I know you've got to sort of weigh up everything, but I could have done it in less time, basically.
I think that's everyone though.
Yeah.
Like everyone, there's probably a bunch of rich people out there that we haven't met yet, right? But if we were to ask them, like, what would one thing be done differently? I would make the same mistakes, but only sooner. And so understanding that there are going to be mistakes and that failure is a requisite for success, it becomes much easier to make decisions because you're not hung up on what people might think or how you might be perceived if you don't get the thing done that you want to get done. And so knowing that, you go, hey, this is the decision I'm making, here's how it's going to happen, here's what I need to do, can you support me, yes or no? If it's yes, great, if no, great, I'm doing it anyway. And then if I'm wrong, I readjust what I'm doing and do something different. And so sometimes being different is not completely going left field. Like for me, if I was to go from PT to real estate, for example, like I'm not talking about that left field decision, I'm saying make just slight adjustments to your process so that you can still achieve the goals of PT, which is my goal. And for you, it might be something different, but it would be like me telling you, if you wanted to become the manager of where you currently work right now and things aren't working and things aren't panning out for whatever reason, that would be like me telling you to go work at Emu Hall, right? It's so left field that it would make no sense at all. Like, and so understanding that making more decisions following through on those said decisions will help you build up trust, and following your word will become much easier. That's the process. That's all it is. You just need to be making more decisions, but you know you're not, so that's why you're so hung up. Make the decisions, follow through on the decisions. If they were wrong, just say, oh, they were wrong, and then make the next decision. Because the longer you take to make decisions, life will pass you by anyway, right? Time passes anyway, so like time stops for nobody. So following through on your word, if that's something you struggle with, make more decisions, make more wrong decisions, and be okay with making more wrong decisions, because then you are able to then figure out what the right decisions are, and then it also becomes much easier for you to make those decisions because you've gotten yourself into the habit of making decisions quickly. And so if you are struggling with making decisions right now, it's because you've gone into the habit of struggling to make decisions. If you no longer relate to that narrative and you start acting on the new narrative of making decisions quickly, then that's where it will switch. Otherwise, you'll just remain hung up. And again, I've been there. Like, I've been hung up on so many decisions that it blows my mind, where other decisions that I know that needed to be made and I made them there on the spot, I felt so much better afterwards. Like, and I know it. Like, I was just speaking to an Italian friend that I have in Italy. She was weighing up whether to leave university. She knew she hated it and she wanted to leave, but the thought of her leaving would influence her parents in a negative way. She felt, like, to clarify, her parents didn't actually care whether she left or not. Like, they'd be happy whatever she did, but she felt that because she went to university, her parents paid for her education, all of that hard work and those sacrifices would be all out the window because she decided that she was going to leave university because she hated it. What did she do? She left. But she left after a year and a half of weighing it up. Then when I congratulated her for leaving, because I said to her, like, there are people out there that just weigh up the decision and never make the decision and stick it out and hate themselves. Where you made the decision, and I commend you for that, because it's challenging. And so, and she was so relieved. And I was like, dude, I told you. Like, I don't mean to like say that like I told you, but like when we were having a conversation in England where we met, I was saying to you that it will eat you up later if you hold on to that decision. And so she made the decision, she made the cut, and she was delighted. And so, and I implore that for anyone who's struggling to make a decision, weigh up the pros and cons, because you need to make that assessment. Making a rash decision, making no decision is better than making a rash decision. But then making no decision is also way worse than making a decision where you might be wrong, but you've made the necessary assessments. And so make the necessary assessments. If the cons outweigh the pros, get rid of the emotional baggage behind making a certain decision and make the decision to do what you need to do so that then you can chart your own course and make whatever it is that you're trying to make successful. And when you do that, following your word won't be very difficult at all, because you know that you're able to make hard decisions, you know you're able to handle adversity, and you know that you're able to understand what it means to actually make a sort of assessment where your decisions and your input are necessary. And it builds that self-confidence, because you're suddenly like, hey, I'm in control of my own decisions. Hey, I'm in control of my situations. I'm in control of my own body and my own internal monologue. Dude, I actually have lots of control. Why am I anxious? Why am I depressed? But a lot of the time, like we spoke about in the podcast before, that's where a lot of that derives from. The inability to make a decision. And often the inability to make a decision is because, like we saw in that post, I think you saw it as well, where I think it was that the captain, like the captain post, where you can't sit on the fucking toilet without scrolling, and you can't walk. A lot of the time you can't make a fucking decision because you never get any fucking quiet time. And so
you have time to think about stuff.
Right, and so you give yourself some quiet time, dude. The quality of your decisions are going to be so much higher, and then with that quality being high, like your word will be almost impeccable. But you've got to decide that that's what you want. That's pretty much, that sums it up. Like, you've got to decide that that's what you want for yourself. Because if you're comfortable with where you are right now, and it might not be in a good spot, you'll stay there. And you'll go, oh, I want to make changes. But you also said to yourself that this is comfortable, but you weren't honest about it and said, hey, I'm uncomfortable being here, but yet my actions haven't changed and my decisions haven't changed either, despite me saying something else. Yeah, no wonder your words eroded. No wonder you don't trust yourself. And to change that, you just need to flip the script.
Yeah, it goes just delving onto with other people as well, like keeping the word. Like we're saying here, the trust in them goes down as well. If someone keeps telling you you're gonna do something, and they never do it for you, you're gonna lose more and more trust in them, and eventually, like, you're not gonna sort of get sort of value out of that at all. Unfortunately, yeah, you might have to sort of not necessarily cut them out, but like spend sort of less time with them, or because they're not following through on what they're saying.
Yeah, and they're not people that you want to hang around with either. Because the thing is, like, imagine getting told that someone will buy you a meal, right? And you go out and you're thinking, hey, you know what, meal's on him. Like he said this week, don't worry, it's on me. Yeah. And then come the end of the meal and he goes, all right, so I pay for my meal, like, are you ready to go? And you go, wait, I thought you were paying. Oh, no, like, it's on, like, you're paying for your own meal, right? Like, just imagine that, like, you get promised the world, right? Yeah. And like, and sharing a meal is like one of humanity's greatest traits, right? And you then get told that you're paying for your own meal, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, and it's just so left field as well. Like, imagine that. Like, that's what's happening when you say all the things that you're saying, and then you go and do something else. Yeah.
And that's what's happening inside your head as well.
Absolutely.
Because to yourself, it's the same situation. You said you're going to do that, and you do something fucking completely different. You're thinking, what the fuck? And then subconsciously, you're thinking, oh, this is that situation again. I'm going to sort of go back to what I'm comfortable doing and not executing 100% in what I told myself that I was going to do. Because that's comfortable for me. I know that even though I'm going to be feeling guilt and shame, that is comfortable to me rather than doing something that's unknown to me and following through on said thing. It's one of them things that you've got to sort of think about when you're sort of making these decisions.
Yeah, and often your decisions are distorted. And what I mean by distorted is that you make decisions based on perceptions. Yeah. And so if you have a skewed perception, whether positive or negative, on a decision, that'll affect not only you making the decision, but then also the outcome of the decision. Because you might go and overreact to something that was just trivial, where you would consider it serious. And so at the same time, like, what you consider serious, someone else might consider trivial. And so if they say something trivial that you consider serious, but then they joke about it, you might overreact when that overreaction might not be warranted. It may be warranted to you, but perhaps because you're hurting, then you feel as though that you're setting a boundary when in reality you just might be overreacting. Vice versa as well. Like, if you set a hard boundary and this is it, and someone doesn't respect that, well, then you can clearly see that this person also has no boundaries and also doesn't respect their own word, because if they knew what boundaries were and they respected their own word, they would understand that you're setting a boundary and you're effectively communicating this set boundary, and that you follow through on your word. But having those two situations happen, then you'll be able to easily tell who doesn't follow through on their word and who does. And so knowing this and applying this are also two very different things. But yeah, like I said, that meal example is an excellent demonstration of what it looks like to not follow through on your word. And it hurts. like especially if it's romantic, where someone might promise you that this is the way that they live their life, these are their values and everything else, and then you invest time and energy into loving them and doing things with them and doing things for them, and then they turn out the exact opposite of who they actually, like they turn out opposite to who they said they were, and it completely breaks your heart. And so it's why having that high value for self and filtering what's important to you and what's not will then allow for you to make way for success in your life, because success requires all of your attention. It requires all of your energy and all of your investment. And if you're making half-assed decisions and you're investing in things that aren't going to promote your success, then success is not going to be there for you. Success is going to be there for that person who's willing to go all in, who's willing to also compromise. Compromise is important. That's another topic we can discuss for a different day. But there are requisites, and being indecisive is not one of those requisites, and not following through on your word is not one of those requisites. And so knowing this and doing what you're doing, are you really setting yourself up for success? If the answer is no, then you probably need to reconsider what it is that you're doing currently and make changes, or otherwise you'll just end up exactly where you are for your entire life. And that's hard. That's hard, knowing that you could have made a change at 28 and then you're 68 and you're going, hey, I've been doing the same thing for over 40 years and I'm still unhappy. And I knew I had a decision that I could make that could easily change the trajectory of my life, but the decision was too hard to make. And instead of admitting that it was too hard to make, I just made other excuses about things that I said I was going to do but didn't do. And that kind of person really just ends up by themselves at the end, because you tell too many people too many different things, never follow through on any of them, and that's really hard to come back from. Like, people are forgiving, but also at the same time, like, the world is relentless in the sense that your time passes you by anyway, and if you don't take opportunities, like, there will be a moment where you feel that you might not have any opportunities left. And so that's not to say at 68 you can't be great and you can't make a change, but at the same time, like, it took you this long. And that's not something that I would want anyone watching this podcast to go through, so that being able to make that decision quickly and follow through, do it. Like, you might feel the pinch in making the decision, you might feel the pinch in the consequences of the decision, but it won't feel like the slug in the rest of your life that you live when you don't make that decision. That's all I have to say.
I think that sums it up for me. There's a lot of different areas that covers, like keeping your word to not just yourself, to other people, like to everything. It just evolves around everything.
Absolutely.
The higher standards you have, the more that means to you as well, and to people around you. The more you value the people that keep to their word as well, I find.
Awesome. That sums up our episode today of the Embodying Excellence Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Please keep your word and subscribe to our channel since you love watching us so much. And stay tuned for more episodes to come.
Yeah, thanks guys.